Meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for April 22nd, 2025. First up, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Please join us for a moment of silence, and Vice Mayor Moore, will you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I see no one has signed up for public comment. Is anyone here that would like to make public comment? Nope, seeing no one. We will move on to new business. Adjusted fourth quarter budget appropriations, city and schools.
Yeah, so we don't have a presentation for tonight. This is just the action item needed to implement the appropriations for the budget amendment you passed last week.
All right, staff recommendation is that the governing body appropriate, $685,266 to the city and $563,837 to the schools for adjustment to the fourth quarter fiscal year 2025.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, FY 2630 capital improvements.
Was capital improvements first?
It is on the agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
No. 6, isn't it? No.
it's seven.
Yeah, it's
We're on
7. Yeah, you're right.
seven.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, capital improvements.
First thing I had to order. Okay, so this is essentially the same presentation I gave to the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago. It basically lays out what 2026 is going to look like for CIP. We'll talk about it from the standpoint of what our 5-year plan is, both from the standpoint of our general fund and our enterprise funds. And we have all of the backup for the 2026 projects if you have any questions, but this will just be an overview at this time. So starting with the general fund, you can see this is what it looks like. Again, we spend a lot of money on transportation projects, but we also get a lot of money through grants for transportation projects. In fact, we get so much money that we don't actually count the transportation when we're looking at the general fund because we pretty much don't do projects that we don't get funded by other sources. So this is what it looks like for 5 years. You'll notice that 26 looks pretty low, and so now I'm going to go back to the previous presentation. Because we don't have our audited numbers, I started the budget from a very conservative position. And so that meant we kicked some things off the 26 CIP that we might be able to put back on once we get our audited numbers. But that's why it looks pretty low. It also, there's no reason to look at anything before 26 because all of the ARPA money has dried up. And so it's going to look artificially the curve isn't going to look right because all that money's gone now. It's not quite gone, but almost. So there's your 5 years, $113.7 million, $70.7 million, like I said, is in transportation, 5.2 to schools, 6.4 for public safety, which is fire and police, 1.3 to public works, and then $450,000 to parks and rec. I mentioned that already, so there it is, will come out again. The administrative line is so big because of all of the IT projects. Those things are expensive, almost as expensive as transportation. No, not quite. But without transportation in the CIP, you're looking at $45.2 million in 25, $42 million in 26. And again, the high school renovation, the fire station were kicked down the road. They took completely off the model because we couldn't make it balance over 5 years with them in there. I don't see in 5 years, I don't see us having any revenue source that would be able to pay for those either, so that's why we took them out of the plan. And like I said, taking transportation out makes sense since it's paid for by other people. Here's water and sewer. Pretty straightforward. Capital repairs, maintenance is what we spend most of our money on, and beyond after debt, of course. We got to pay for the upgrades and the maintenance of the YOSA facility. $67% is for debt. Not a lot we can do about that either. That's, it's necessary costs. 17% for infrastructure maintenance and upgrades. We'll talk more about water and sewer when we get into the budget presentation. Pretty straightforward. Stormwater, same thing, much smaller fund, but spending $8 million over 5 years to mostly maintain and replace and repair the system. Again, pretty straightforward. Still looking for that bird sanctuary money, which we still think we're going to get. So, total city CIP. There you have it. All goes well, we'll be spending about $129 million over all funds in the next 5 years. And, you want to project these things very conservatively. I tried to go backwards and see what your projections were over the last 5 years and see what you actually spent. A little harder than I thought it would be, but it does look like you trend conservatively, meaning you spend more money on your projects than you thought you would. So that 129 is probably going to be larger, which is a good thing for the city. Hopefully it's not because things got more expensive, it's more because of more projects, but that was one of the things I couldn't figure out when I looked backwards. I'm not a fancy PowerPoint person. I always just put everything up at once, so I always get surprised when new things slide up on me. So again, pretty straightforward. Again, it's a summary of the same thing without transportation. And so that's an overview of the CIP, $129 million next 5 years. The department heads are all here if you want to talk about individual projects. I sent you the 26 projects last week. I believe there were about 60 of them, and I was thinking I'd go through them one by one, but I don't think anyone wants to see that. So if you have any questions, now's the time.
All right, thank you. I have a couple questions before I kick it down. I wanted to talk about our long-term vehicle plan. We've been replacing them pretty aggressively with the cost changing of cars and even used cars going up. Are we evaluating fully using our vehicles before replacing them?
Yeah, so there are 3 areas that I want to focus on next year where I think we can make some significant strides in savings. Vehicles is one of them. The enterprise lease program that we're in that's the reason why their vehicles are being replaced at the pace that they are. I don't think that's necessary, and I think it's extraordinarily expensive. And so Mark has done a lot of research and some analysis on this, and I think even we had to kind of pause it because we had to get ready for this presentation, but I think we're at the point now where we think the next 6 cars or next 3 cars, I can't remember. We're going to probably purchase them rather than lease them from Enterprise because the 5-year cost of an Enterprise lease on one of the cars was $105,000, and that's a lot for a car. So we don't have a fleet policy, which is another thing I'd like to pursue, where you talk about what is the maximum return on a used vehicle. So there's a point at which you want to get rid of the car because it's worth more when you replace it. But it's certainly not at 5 years in a city that's 3 miles long, because they just don't get the miles on them. So it'll be a combination of age and miles, and which will then direct through policy when we replace the cars, not through an agreement with a for-profit, car vendor that has a 3% profit built into it every year. So yes, that is expensive, and I hope to untangle us from that relationship.
Okay. My next question is about the Phase 4 parking. We have it in our CIP. Can you remind me, what was the timeline for the developer to do it?
February.
The one that just happened?
Yeah, the one that just passed, yeah. So I did talk to the attorneys, I can't remember his name, I think it's Carl, actually, and Dean earlier last week. The driver of that project is the owner of Building A and Building B, Hosta. So he's the one that's gonna have to tell us, okay, I need this parking now, because he's the one who's, that leases those first floor commercial retail spaces, and so they're the ones that are gonna need the parking. He seems to be happy right now with the progress being made by the developer behind, so that may go away. I'm hoping that it does, but at the end of the day, if we have to do it, then it will be driven by Mr. Hosta.
Okay, thank you. Let's go down to Councilmember Javed and work our way down, and then I'll come back.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. What was you said were you able to get the 5-year previously total?
No,
Spending?
I did. I only got back about 2 years, just
Okay,
to.
so we don't know what the.
But again, I couldn't figure out if it was if the costs were different because things got more expensive,
Yeah,
or there were more projects.
got it. I mean, I have no general question regarding CIP. I think some of the items that are on the departments, I think could be deferred to later years if we need to prioritize, but I could do a follow-up email with those items.
Yeah, any questions that we don't think of tonight or you think of later, please definitely email.
Absolutely.
Just for my edification, could we talk about the water and sewer, the debt?
I was just looking to see if Calvin was here in case.
He is. He is. Just so I can understand, what the nature of that is.
I'll give it a shot, and then Calvin can correct me. So we have to pay for our share of the treatment of the
Yeah.
water, and so the plant at which this is done is constantly being expanded, upgraded, and whatnot, and it's just our share. We have
It's
to
just
keep
our
paying
share of the agreement. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Carl, on graph, on fiscal year, hold on, 28, there's a bump, a significant bump in transportation of $45 million. What is that?
In transportation,
It says transportation, expense category, and then in fiscal year 28, it goes from 6 million in 27 to 45 million in FY 28.
I can only assume we have some big projects coming.
We hope so. I would love to know what that is.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head, and I only brought the 26 projects, so.
I can answer that.
Okay, Tony.
Where'd that come from?
Tony.
That's going to be your Route 28 corridor improvements. It's a $40 million project.
Some of the money is flowing to us, or they're going to VDOT directly?
I think Calvin can answer that. I believe it's going to be flowing through Prince William County.
Or
Oh.
we should-
So we originally assumed that we would be the pass-through entity for the funding, and then we thought about pulling this out of the budget in general because it looked like we would not ever touch the money. But what we're being told now is that we probably will be the pass-through entity for the funding, so we do need to show it in our budget as an accounting exercise, so.
Yeah, that explains it. Yeah, that's a big chunk of money.
Sorry, just can I ask a follow-up on that? In the 30, then you have 12.7 million. What's that bump?
Ooh, at FY '30,
Yeah, it goes from 45 to 3 million back up to 13.
Calvin, that's going to be the Mathis Avenue extension.
yeah, so we have a study of Mathis Avenue, it's a feasibility study to see if we can extend Mathis Avenue out to Old Centerville Road.
Okay.
That is not gonna be city money, won't be general fund money, it's grant money.
Okay, thank you.
So it's grant money.
Yeah, virtually all the transportation money is grant money.
So the category on this general fund CIP 5-year model, money coming from the county for FY 28 for Route 28, we're not considering that general fund though, are we?
Well, yeah, it comes into the general fund, yeah.
Huh. And then the money that he referred to in FY '30 for the Mathis, that wouldn't be general fund money, would it?
It would. We only have 4 funds, and that 3 of them are enterprise, so this is the only one we have left. Yeah,
I like that, Carl.
yeah.
The other question I had was, facilities. There's a little comment here, includes city hall lease payments. I thought we were paying our lease payments differently from the, yeah. I didn't know we're capitalizing lease payments. That doesn't seem like a capital expense. Usually it's something that could be over 5 years, has a life of its own.
So, yeah, I agree. I'm not used to using a CIP the way the city has used it.
Me either.
And I am going to be looking at making some changes to that moving forward, but, I had to jump into the deep end when I got here, so.
I appreciate that.
But moving forward, I don't think people are also capital expenses, so I wouldn't put those in there either, but we'll look at that as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, down here,
I
Councilmember.
don't have questions yet.
Just kind of going back to slides 7 and 8, we talked about a little bit about the lease agreements and kind of we can really kind of work with that. But I noticed that in FY '27 on water and sewer, we jump up to 456 from 200, almost double, more than double there. And then also on the stormwater in FY '28, we're at 722,000. So if we just have a really big jump, if we're projecting that we're going to be taking care of that lease and downsizing, but we're projecting a whole lot of expenditure there.
Yeah, so in water and sewer, that's a new flusher truck, so we don't lease that from Enterprise, we have to buy that. And in stormwater, that's the next phase of the conveyance replacement. So, and again, that's just where we've put it for now, depending on how the fund sits as we get there. We may move it, we may do something differently, but that's why both those bump.
What's the 722? You said that's a what?
Which
The
fund?
stormwater on
Stormwater is phase 6?
FY '28
In
is
FY
722. The next slide. Look at FY '28. Vehicle.
Oh, vehicles, I'm sorry, I was thinking the top line.
Yeah, what is that? Do you know? Do you remember?
We're talking about a vehicle replacement in
vehicle.
FY
It says
'28?
vehicles 722, 158.
Right, that's probably the flusher truck for stormwater.
Okay.
We're not allowed to hydro excavate with our sanitary sewer flusher truck. So for hydro excavation and stormwater work, we have a different flusher truck that doesn't have to be sterilized because it's been used in sanitary work.
So what are we using? We have one now?
Yes,
Okay, and then we're just replacing it?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Can't use it for both. Yeah,
Thank you. That's all.
okay.
I have 2 questions for schools.
All right.
First of all, it's page 74 in the total CIP. The title is Replace Student Staff Desks, Cafeteria Tables, and Chairs, but then the project description says that you're replacing the PA's clock system.
Yeah, that's probably a typo.
Right,
It's
PA.
the desks.
It's the desks, so not the PA. Okay. And then the playgrounds, when were they last redone?
Before I was here. I
Okay.
think that might be, I really don't know. I'll have to find out. It's been a long time.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Did you have another
I
question?
did, thank you,
Yes.
Mayor. No, it's not for you, David.
But thanks.
It's more for Parks and Rec, more for Jay. Where are we? I thought we had put in the CIP fixing the Signal Hill Park bathrooms to make them ADA compliant in 26 or 27. I didn't see that project. I might have missed it.
I believe it is still in the CIP, I just don't believe it's in 26.
I'd like to know when. When is that project? Does anyone have an idea when that might be coming up?
You need a big-
'Cause I thought we had moved or prioritized that
They're on
because of the
28.
problems.
It's on 28,
I think
I
FY
think, FY 28.
Yeah, I think so too.
So did that get moved? 'Cause it was earlier than 28. FY 32, 33?
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, that was definitely.
33?
So it's 9 to 5.
Oh.
I will tell you that one of the things, like I had rehearsed to do the other one first, was I put this together as bare bones as I could, and this is a status quo budget. It basically allows us to provide the same level of service in 06 as we did, or 26 as we did in 25. I believe we're going to have more money than I planned for, at which point we can start talking about what we want to bump up. But in order to make the budget balance, we had to kick some of the more expensive things down the road. It's an exercise. It's not science. It's more of an art. So hearing that, we can talk about it once we get our audit done and we know how much money we have.
Yeah, bring it back.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions about the CIP? If you guys think of anything, please email them. And now on to the budget.
And I will say, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, my daughter's getting married in the first week of May, so I'm only saying the sooner I can get information, the better, just because I'm going to be missing this week right in the middle of this critical period for the budget, and I don't want to leave anybody hanging, but I can't not go to that, so.
Okay, so if you have questions, email them
As soon as you can.
as soon as you can, or expect a delay in your answers. Okay.
Exactly. Well, I'd probably have to ask Tony anyway, but yeah. All right, so here we go. 2026, fiscal year 2026 budget. I always like to start with a little statement on why we do this. I think it's important that we balance the priorities of the governing body with the needs of the people you're governing. And by doing that, you build trust, and the tool for that is the budget. There's nothing else we do that has more impact on what our residents and our businesses and visitors can do in the city. So I always like to start with a statement on why it's important that we do this, why we have to take it seriously. So this is what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about your priorities that, we spent some time at the retreat a month or so ago. Talk about the definition of terms, and this is more for me than it is for you, just because we talk about things a little differently over here than I'm used to, and I've made some pretty bad assumptions based on that. So I want everybody to know when I say something, what I think it means, and so we'll at least all speak in the same language. We'll talk about the assumptions that are built into the budget and some of the highlights. We'll go over all three enterprise funds, then we'll go over the general fund, then give you the total snapshot, a little summary, talk about the future, and then what's next. So through a series of exercises, including some email prioritization sheets and some rankings of some of the priorities that you came up with, we met at the retreat on March 29th, and we came up with some actionable items. I do want to say I know that nobody was happy with that process, and we're going to do it differently next time. I think we started with priorities that were last addressed in 2021 or 2022, and I don't know if they accurately reflect the will of this body. So it is what we had to work with here, and so that's where we're starting, but I recognize that we're going to start earlier next year and do something different to come up with the priorities and how we're going to develop the budget next year. First priority that you talked about was increased sustainable tax revenue, which is economic development. That's focus of much of what we do here. Specifically, continue to pursue opportunities in the downtown area and expand the base. That work is ongoing and underway. Not much we can do to speed it up or do anything. We just have to keep monitoring and supporting it where we can. Support small business by promoting association and collaboration with regional economic development organizations. That's in here because it's a priority, but it is, we can do this within existing resources, but it will be a part of a work plan once we get this approved. Next thing is financial management, ensure the successful implementation of our new ERP solution. Again, this is underway because it was paid for with ARPA money. It's been paid for. Doesn't start until July, but again, seeing some less than perfect implementations of other software systems in the city. I want to make sure this one goes well, so we'll be monitoring this and hiring someone to manage it for us and to make sure we successfully implement it in every way. I think once we've done that, that will help some of the other systems that aren't working very well, because they're all going to talk to each other, be tied together, and then we'll start building up a base of people who know how to do it so we can help each other, rather than having just one or two people who have a function and nobody else knows how to help them. So that's underway. Service delivery and staffing. One of the things we talked about was getting top quality legal representation. So just a little pitch to anyone who hasn't finished their grading of the written RFPs, please get those in. I think we've gotten 4 so far. And we have sort of reserved the 29th and 30th of next week for in-person interviews. So we just want to figure out if we're going to be doing 2 firms, 3 firms, or 4 firms. So just a little pitch there outside. But that's underway, and that'll be up to you to decide who the best option is for the city. We also talked about improving efficiency, and I just use the word codification for lack of a better word. I don't know that it would necessarily be code, but creating manuals for the governing body, creating policy for staff, covering areas like ethics, code of conduct, best practices, training, all those things that we don't have a lot of robust policy on right now. Another one was grow and maintain infrastructure, continue to invest in parks, so this might be a place for that Signal Hill infrastructure project you were talking about, and continue to pursue opportunities to improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety. Again, those are all underway. That's Steve Hall spends a lot of time doing just that for the transportation projects, and so again, these are all underway. Continuing to invest in parks if it's going to be infrastructure that isn't something we haven't necessarily budgeted beyond the $500,000 or so that's in the CIP for parks, but we can prioritize that once we figure out where we come down with the audit. Balanced allocation of resources, and this is previously it was called slicing the pie, and I don't like that, so I called it balanced allocation of resources. But slicing the pie in there is kind of a tip to what it used to be called. But one of them is, keep people safe, and that's basically funding our schools and our public safety organizations, police and fire, and specifically without relying on penalty revenue. I know that we spend a considerable amount of our red light and school zone speed cameras on stipends for the police department, maybe the fire department too, I can't remember. But we'd like to develop a plan that doesn't count on people doing bad things in order to be able to make it work. So that's going to be a part of what we focus on this year as well. And then the next 2, pay market competitive wages to staff and continue to reduce real estate tax. So the budget that I'm going to give you is balanced, and it does include a 1-cent reduction in real estate tax. Where it does fall short is paying market competitive wages to staff. I think that we are probably between 15 and 20% behind the market in most of our positions. I think most of our directors are probably 25% behind market. I do have work ongoing to figure out what it would take to get to within citing distance of market. But again, that's going to be dependent on what our final ending fund balance is from the audit. So I'll be coming back to you. I'm very optimistic that it's going to come back very positively, at which point I'll come back to you and with a plan to look at staff compensation in more detail. Definition of terms. This is where I got tripped up a little bit. So freezing a position is keeping the position vacant or delaying the hiring of a position even though it's in the budget. So it may be in the budget for its full cost and you're going to have a bump in the road coming and you want to plan for it, so you're going to freeze a position or 15 or whatever you need to save that money. Or sometimes it's in the budget for $1, just so you keep the position on the books and you know that once you get over the hump, you're going to refund that position. Previously to this, freezing in Manassas Park means cutting. It means the positions were eliminated, and so I was operating from a false assumption that we had these positions in the budget. We just hadn't filled them. In reality, they were gone. So I use freezing to talk about positions that are just frozen. We're not cutting them. We're just holding off on hiring or keeping the salary savings aside because we can see something coming that we might need the money for. Cutting a position is when we eliminate it, and that's whether it's a RIF or it's just cutting vacancies. If it comes out of the budget, it's a cut. And a lot of times that's used to reflect longer-term problems, and you know that this isn't just a bump you have to get over, this is going to be a longer haul, and so you probably aren't going to be able to fund that position for a period of time. So again, this is not a criticism of how it's been done in the past, it was just confusing to me, so I wanted to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Reserves. So reserves are the dollars that are set aside by policy, and they're available to be used during unplanned significant events or revenue shortages. Your policy is 15% of your revenues for your reserves, and that's what reserves are to me. Now, between reserves and your expenditures is some amount of money. And in the past, you've also referred to those as reserves, and that's very confusing to me. I've always referred to that as unassigned fund balance. That means it's money that you have that is above your reserve threshold, but hasn't been allocated for anything. So that's, just to understand, that's what I mean when I talk about unassigned fund balance. It's not reserves on top of reserves. So the assumptions I made in the budget, I think we probably have ending fund balance of about $17 million. I'm going to assume 13, so I built this based on having $13 million. 15% of that you have to have set aside for your reserves, which is in this budget I'm presenting as 10,736,640, which leaves just over $2 million in unassigned fund balance. We'll talk about that more later. General inflation rate baked into the budget is about 2.5 to 3, depending on what the item is or what the department is. Some things inflate faster than others, so some of the department heads use different inflators when they were forecasting their future. I did put in a 2.5% COLA for most staff, and I say most because the state has mandated a 3% COLA for Department of Social Services staff. So that is also in the budget, but a lot of that is also paid for by the state, so it's not as big a hit for us. It does include full funding of the ADU, WDU program, and all the other economic development commitments. I just want to make sure that, again, this is status quo. This is 2025 again, a little bit of a raise for people. It also assumes that the enterprise funds will be self-sustaining. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail in a minute, but that is an assumption I made when I built this budget. I did build in a real estate tax reduction of 1 cent per $100 of assessed value. I did not make any changes to any other general fund revenues, personal property tax, business tax, it all remains the same. So that unassigned fund balance, we basically stole $1.4 million, or $1.3 million, I guess. I think it's a little less than 1.4, from the school stabilization fund, and using $56,000 of unassigned fund balance to make the entire budget balance. Again, once we figure out where we are, I have every intention of making sure the school is whole on that, but we sat down with them and they were very kind, and we came to an agreement on what we could both tolerate. And so this is how we got to a balanced budget. I also wanted to mention that 26 and 27 were supposed to be slim. This is when your ARPA money runs out, and it was projected that you were going to have some slim margins, and you do. And that's why you have unassigned fund balance. You don't want to spend it all. You don't want to spend right down to your reserves, because that gives you no flexibility when things like this happen. So that's where we got to where we are today. I also want you to know that this is very conservative. We will continue to pursue all of get other people to pay for as much of our stuff as we can, whether it be state grants, federal grants, or what have you. Partnerships, interlocal agreements, there's a lot of ways to make your dollars go farther, and this group has been very good at that, and we will continue to do that. So I made notes, I want to make sure I didn't miss any. All right, enterprise funds. Oops. We have 3: water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. The purpose of an enterprise fund is that it usually is what's used to manage a single function or a very discrete function. So It's used a lot for utilities. We actually used it in my last city for our contract with the sheriff's office for police services, but anything that, the ins and outs are pretty well defined. You know what the costs are, and the users of the system are supposed to pay for the cost of the system. There are situations where you do need to subsidize one or more of your enterprise funds, but typically that is not considered best practice unless you're in dire straits. I only say that because I'm going to talk later about how we've been doing it. So this is the assumption I made when I built this budget. So first one, water and sewer. So now we're going to be talking about the rate recommendations for these three funds. If we do nothing to adjust the rate in water and sewer, you can see the bottom line with the red lines under it. That's how much money we need to take out of the general fund in order to make the water and sewer fund whole. That adds up pretty quickly. And that's not cumulative. That's that year. You know, fiscal year 28, 1.3 million. Again, got to buy that flusher truck, and so that's what it would look like if we did nothing to adjust the rate over the next 5 years. If we wanted to fix it all at once, oops, come on, go forward. Boy, oh boy. If we wanted to fix it all at once, we'd need to have a 12% increase in rates in 26. And then that, you see that the general fund subsidy disappears all the way out to 31, and it allows you to put contributions into reserves in 26 and 27. And now all of a sudden you're able to buy that flusher truck without impacting any other fund. But that's, like I mentioned earlier, forecasting is more of an art than it is a science. So what I'm recommending is 10%. It still gives you looks like you're gonna have to do a subsidy in 2028 when that flusher truck comes due. But that's enough time for us to see where we are. We're going to be adding users, as you know, we have a bunch of residential coming online in that time. We have a bunch of commercial coming online. So we're going to have more revenue than we have now. It's just not known how much more revenue. So I'm recommending that we just fix the subsidy now, and we'll worry about 2028 when we get closer to 2028. And like I said, we're still trying 2028. So what is that? I put this slide in because this slide was in a previous presentation where it mentions that the city deferred rate increases for over 10 years. This is one of those things where the hole gets bigger the longer you let it be dug. You know, I mean, it's just, if you keep doing this year over year, the amount you have to raise rates now to catch up gets pretty mind-boggling. It gets really hard to sell. And so unless you're going to get into a position where you're always going to be subsidizing your enterprise funds, which you shouldn't do, that means projects, that means all the things that the general fund pays for, is their ability to do that is reduced if you subsidize your enterprise funds. And that's something that happened way before you guys got on the council or on the governing body, and it's a situation we're in, and I'd like to see us address that so we have a very straightforward budget moving forward. So what does it mean if we raise the water and sewer rate by 10%? So typical residential customer uses 5 T-gallons a month. T-gallons is cleverly 1,000 gallons, so 5,000 gallons of water a month. So what you'd see is a 41-cent increase in the water cost, 68-cent increase in the sewer cost. So the total for 1 gallon of water usage would go up $1.09. There is a base fee that everyone pays, and that would go up $4.98. So if you only use 1 gallon of water a month, you'd pay, it'll go up about $6. But basing it on the average usage of 5,000 gallons, the base fee would increase to $49.78 or to $54.75, and the water usage would go up to $59.65, and the total impact for that would be about an increase of $10.43 a month for your average 5,000 gallon a month residential user. This is one of those things that is completely, you can use less water, you can use more water. I mean, you're going to pay for what you use, so you can manage this as a consumer if you think that that's something you want to do to lower your rate. But that's what the impact is of the 10%. Stormwater, much the same. If we don't do anything to the rate, we start having problems next year, and it just gets bigger again, flusher truck, conveyance replacements, these things, it starts to add up. So I always like to talk about what do we do if we're going to fix it all right now? Well, we're going to raise the rates by 75%, of course. How do you think that would go over? Not well. So obviously we're not going to do that. So what I'm recommending though is 25%. And you'll notice that that also requires another 30% in 27, 30% in 28, and that is the minimum necessary to not subsidize the stormwater fund. I'm not too concerned about 27 to 28 because again, these forecasts are very conservative, and so once we get 6 months of 26 under our belt, we can then take a look at 27, and I'm sure the picture will change. I would be shocked to find out that we're still looking at a 30% increase in 27, but as far as the modeling goes, that's what it would take to not subsidize the stormwater fund. So, yeah, I just said all this. I also will say this is one fund that has been significantly supplemented in the past with federal grant dollars, so that's one of the things we can't predict. I don't know with the sort of the chaotic environment in Washington, D.C. right now, what exactly that's going to mean for these types of projects. I've had conversations with Merchant McIntyre that have been very optimistic, and I've had them that have been very pessimistic. So a lot of times it depends on what the project is and how you talk about it. So we're going to try to educate ourselves as best as we can to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position to continue to get federal dollars for these things, but I can't predict that. So it's not built into the model. So what does it mean to the average residential customer? So whether you pay your property taxes in 2 installments or once a year, the annual impact is $45.72. That's what 25% increase does to the average residential customer. Solid waste. Okay. Solid waste is a fund that has been subsidized for as far back as I can see. It's the smallest of your funds, and it is interesting to me that you have subsidized it. And when I say you, I don't mean you, that the governing bodies of the past have done this. But it's not a good practice. The fund should be self-sustaining. That's how they're designed. That's what they're for. If you didn't want to manage it that way, then you could just throw it in the general fund with everything else and just pay for it however you'd like. But it's supposed to be self-sustaining. So if we were going to fix it all today, it would require a 25% increase in the solid waste fee in 26, and then you'll notice that removes the subsidy. You don't see a lot of buildup of reserves in solid waste because there's no infrastructure. We don't have vehicles, we don't have stuff, and so that one is okay to not have any kind of extra there. So we try to stay as close to zero as we can on that, and that's as close as we can get. But now I'm going to be a hypocrite, tell you what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting a 10% increase in the solid waste fee. It will result in a small subsidy from the general fund, which is built into the budget. It is included in the budget I'm presenting for fiscal year 26 and then fiscal year 27. The reason I'm proposing that is because it is a small amount, and the contract gets over in 27. So you're going to have to get a new contract with either the same hauler or new hauler, but you're going to have to go out for bid. And I suspect that the costs are going to be significantly more than they are right now. So, that's going to be an impact when that happens, and so I don't mind subsidizing a little bit between now and then, and so that's why I made the lower recommendation. What that means for your average residential customer? Well, your curbside customer will be paying $2.49 a month more. If you live in a multifamily facility where you dump your garbage into a dumpster, you're paying $2.03 more, and a senior will pay 68 cents a month more. So that's the impact there. Here's the impact on the general fund if we did nothing to any of the enterprise fund rates. Again, that is all things that we pay for out of the general fund, whether it be projects or people, events, those things. We'd have to find that amount of things to cut in order to continue to fund if we were to fund or subsidize all of the enterprise funds from the general fund. So I put that in there just as an example. I just really want to make sure that if we do decide that we're going to subsidize it, that we're doing it with our eyes wide open, and that we know that the consequences of that not only have an impact right away, but they have an impact, a lasting impact in future budgets. So, and again, this is a problem you inherited. The fact that they have been subsidized and hadn't raised rates for 10 years is not your fault, but it is incumbent upon us to try to fix that. I'm going to pause now because I've been talking a lot, and before we get into the general fund, any questions on the 3 enterprise funds? Plus, I also need to drink water.
I have a question, then we'll pass it down. Have we done an evaluation of any administrative fees that are being paid out of the enterprise funds that might belong actually to the general fund?
Yeah, that is a noticeable thing when you go through that, but that'll take some analysis to figure out. I would like to do a fee study moving forward to look at that, as well as, the internal fees, as well as what we're charging external customers, like for plan review and for all the other things. We need a comprehensive fee study, but it doesn't look like it's in good alignment right now, but I don't have time to do anything with it for this budget. But moving forward, that will be another place that we're going to need to do some serious analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know which fund might be the most out of sync, or you have no idea?
Well, no, it's in order of the size of the funds: sewer and water, stormwater, and then solid waste, in that order. Yeah.
Thank you. So questions about enterprise funds, Councilmember Cyberlin?
Kind of just totaling up the impact of what you're proposing on the cost for the resident. I think it's per month. We're looking at like $58.50 approximately from the total. Is that right? Because we have like a couple bucks here, $249, $45.72.
The $45.72 is annual.
Oh, it's
That's
annual.
once a year, so you'd have to divide that by 12, which
Okay.
is just less than 4.
Okay. And is there a plan with the cost savings if we just, I don't mind moving the money and making it right as far as how we treat our funds, and but is that going back to kind of that lowering the tax rate? Are we putting that money where it needs to go to help out the resident that's actually lowering the costs and letting it?
I understand what you're asking. They're actually not related. What this does, though, is it gives you an opportunity at some point to maybe lower your enterprise rates. We're way behind in some of our maintenance and replacement projects, and so once those things are caught up, then there's no need to have $3 million in reserves, and so you could look at it from the standpoint of stabilizing it and possibly reducing the fees over time. The relationship to the general fund is that's where the property tax, real estate tax is the
Right.
primary source for that. And so yes, if you're going to subsidize them or not subsidize them, then that will have an impact on what the real estate tax rate is. But I really like to look at them individually and not necessarily as a whole.
Well, we're taking the general fund and we're not going to use the general fund to subsidize the enterprise fund anymore. So therefore, we should have more money in the general fund to help us lower that tax rate, right?
Yes, that's why I'm proposing a 1 cent reduction in the tax rate. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess I just think we should do better.
And that's how it all balances out in the end. If we decided we do want to subsidize one or the other at some level, then we've got to go back to the general fund and figure out what's coming out. Or maybe we don't do the 1 cent or whatever. You've got to figure out how to
I like
balance
the
it.
not subsidizing. I think it's cleaner for sure.
Mhm.
But I definitely think once you get to the whole tax rate thing, I think we could do better there.
Yeah.
That's it.
No questions.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. My question is your assumptions on the enterprise funds. Are they? How did you tackle UOSA or other entities increasing their costs to us? Is this a flat line projection, or are you factoring in water rates just going up general for us?
Yeah, everything is factored in, and the way I did that was I used my sharpest pencils, Calvin and Tony, and but yeah, everything that we can see coming has been factored in.
Okay.
Having surprises is not fun when you're budgeting.
No.
So, yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
No questions. I just want to echo what Councilmember Recycling said about, my math is getting 136 a year for the average family. And if that's what has to be done to shore up the three funds, then that probably makes sense, and keeping it separate from the general fund. But then we have to look at, okay, if that is what has to happen to ensure these funds, like what are we doing on the real estate side to kind of balance it out to help people out? Because one of the things that we have property values that are going up that's outside of our control, but what is in our control is the rate, right? So we can try to mitigate some of those property tax assessments that people are getting by affecting the rate. So I think, I appreciate the 1%, or the 1 cent, but I think we should think about how we balance that, given the fact that so many of these other things in the enterprise funds are going up.
Well, and like you mentioned, the assessed value is going up, but so is the cost of running these enterprise funds. And like I said, when you go out for bid on your trash hauling in a couple years, you're getting a screaming deal. I think there's going to be some sticker shock there. So again, you didn't dig the hole for yourself, but it's the hole you're in. So how you decide to get out of it is completely up to you. I'm just making my recommendation, but if you want to do something different, then we'll figure something else out. But this is how I think we get the Band-Aid ripped off and move on down the road. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I'm a little shocked right now, but historically, I don't support the budget with any increases, especially, with the water and sewer increases that you're proposing. I think are really steep. The reason we're, I think, subsidizing right now is to stabilize the base rate for our residents at this time. Since all our taxes are very high right now, water and sewer is high, solid waste is high. So we're subsidizing to help our community to afford at least the basic essentials for public health, right? It's a societal need, water and sewer. So subsidizing from general fund, I have no problem until we get more revenue coming in from economic development, then we could maybe focus on a rate adjustment at that time. But right now, with the steep raises of all three funds, I probably will not support that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, again, the other end of that is whatever you decide to subsidize by comes out of the general fund. So
Correct.
that's, find your $500,000 thing that you're not going to be able to do, that's in the general fund. So.
And that's something we would have to, like a work session or something, to actually come sit down together as a governing body with the department heads and figure out where we can do cost savings. On a second note, if we go back on, I guess, to your assumptions and highlights on slide 8. Just going down the line. Yeah, the 1 cent increase, I agree with, Stacy and Kevin and everybody else here. I think that's kind of low. I think last year we did, 3 cents at least? With the assessments going up, it just gets eaten up, and the residents don't even see a dent with the 1 cent reduction. My next question would be on the next bullet, the BPO and meals. Do you know what the rate is right now?
Should, but I didn't include them in there here. I think meals is 4%, and I can't remember people is.
Okay, if that's something you can provide later on, that would be great. Just to see historically where we've been with that, I would like to see that kind of data. With more restaurants coming online, I think that would kind of increase our revenue as well if we just kind of did like an adjustment over there, if we have not done so in the past. That's something to consider.
Yeah, the only issue with that is those are such small pieces of the puzzle that it's not going to have much of an impact unless you're going to raise them tremendously. It wouldn't have much of an impact. So, and I will say the 1 cent was what I got out of the retreat. It sounded like everybody was looking at 1 to 1.5 cent reduction. So that's what we built in. So.
Okay. And then I guess my next would be the next bullet underneath that one, the 1.4 that you're taking from the school stabilization fund.
Do Do you need to
We-
present the general fund first before we ask these questions? Or, because you weren't finished, we were asking about enterprise funds.
Yeah,
Oh.
it doesn't matter to me.
Are they gonna be answered?
I don't know. I don't know what
Okay.
the question's gonna be.
Well, why don't we finish it and then we'll ask our general fund questions?
Well, it wasn't in the packet, that's why I was asking now, but that's fine if he wants to finish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's
The
finish and then ask
stabilization
her-
fund wasn't addressed, that's why.
Okay. I have a question about that too, I guess if you want to answer that now, yeah.
Well, that's in the school's budget, and there was, for some reason, I don't know why, there was a line put in the budget to back the schools up in the event they had reduced revenue because of lowered number of students, enrollment, yeah, that's the word. And that didn't happen, and so we wanted to get that money back out. And so I don't know what the rationale was, and we talked to the schools, we talked to everybody around, and nobody knows why the previous city manager had that in
Well,
there, so.
The thing we worked on with the schools for, since we started, was an agreement, like a MOU kind of thing, saying that, you know, we would agree for the schools to keep the stabilization fund for the school purposes, right? Historically, before that, we were taking their fund balance back into our general fund.
Yeah, and that's only
Oh.
part of this. This was a different line in the budget, it wasn't that. And so,
Okay.
and that's why I mentioned, once we know how much money we have, we do want to make the schools whole on that again, but that was part of it.
And do we know the total amount in that line?
The 500, it was 536,000, I believe, was the number that we couldn't figure out where it came from or what it was for.
And then in the stabilization
Would be the 1.3, so it's about 800,000
total?
that we used for this, yes. The stabilization fund was over $1 million.
Okay. That's it for now, but I guess we could continue on.
Okay. General fund. Like I said, talking about a 1 cent per $100 reduction. This is what that looks like for single-family townhouse and condominium residential in the city. You'll notice that it still results in an increase, and you might say, well, why is that? Well, that's because our assessed values went up in residential over 7% over the year. So the overall cost is higher because of the increased value, even though the rate is lower. 7.48% was the average increase on those three classes of residential. And that last column is just what that would look like for your average resident. The average single-family home is going to be at $507,689,000 next year, and so that would be a $483 increase with the 1% or 1 cent reduction. And just for fun, I included a slide that said if we didn't do anything and kept it the same, that's what the impact would be if you kept it the same as what it was. So.
I appreciate that.
I did include a local comparison of taxes. This is the list of cities that has been used before for this list of cities and towns and counties, I guess. And so one of the things you'll notice is that with that 1 cent reduction, we're no longer the highest in this group. I've heard some arguments that you can't include towns because they get taxed by their township and by the county. But the argument I heard was, but they get 2 parks departments and 2, police departments and 2 things like that. And that's not the same thing. The impact to someone who lives in Herndon is $1.41 per 100, regardless of what that is. What that argument is a value proposition. That's not about what the cost is to the person that lives in that house. I also started doing some looking and found out that the reason Manassas Park is the last city to be incorporated in the state of Virginia is because the state of Virginia put a moratorium on incorporating cities after this city incorporated. And a number of these cities have made efforts to undo that because they'd like to go out on their own. The reason cities incorporate is because they don't like what they're getting from the county, or they don't like what they're paying for whatever they're getting from the county. So I still think it's a valid comparison, and so I included it. And you look at places like Loudoun, who just have tremendous outside revenue sources, and so they're able to do some huge lowerings as time goes by. Personal property tax, again, I'm not recommending any change in that, but this is basically the same group, same comparisons. We are the lowest there. Manassas City is about 10 cents per hundred more than we are. The county's 20, but I guess Loudon is, yeah. Well, so Loudon went from 415 to 309, so they're able to drop that down over $1 in 1 year because of the data centers, quite frankly. So we can't compete with that. And I just realized I spelled Loudon wrong. So anyway, that's for what it's worth. That's what that comparison is. Total city budget overview. Here's the big chart. This includes everything, all the enterprise funds and everything else. Again, it's not useful to go back and show. You'll see all these negative numbers and all these parentheses, which indicate negative numbers. That's because the previous years all had that ARPA influx, and so we don't have that anymore. So please don't get hung up on that. This is just us coming back down to reality and starting with a good base budget. This is just the general fund. Again, same thing. You'll notice fiscal year 25 at your A1 amendment, you had, it was 118.7 million down to 82, but that's a lot of that money is from that ARPA that you no longer have. Here's the 5-year forecast. You used to get a 10-year forecast. Forecasting, like I said, is an art, not a science, and when you get beyond 4 or 5 years, you're really just throwing darts at a dartboard. So we knocked her down to 5. So you see some pretty modest in increases in revenues over the next couple of years. After that, it gets a little better because we're building in some of the development that should come online. We didn't add any residential units in fiscal year 25, but fiscal year 26 we're gonna add a bunch. Because this project over in the parking lot here is going to come online. Northview should be breaking ground, and even though that project that they talked about last week is not in the city, why can't I remember what it's called? We would be their city. Mayfield, yeah, we would be their city, and so we will be the benefactor of them going out to eat, them going to the movie theater, them doing the things they're going to do. We'll be the benefactor of that, even though we won't get the property taxes from them. Having those 180 houses right next door and actually surrounded by our city will be a benefit to us. So I think we're going to be all right there. I did include this slide. This slide was from a previous presentation where they predicted that a 3% raise in 25 and a 2.5% raise in the following years would keep staff up with the market. And I only included that as an illustration to say forecasting is an art, it's not a science, because that's not even close. That's not going to even keep them close. I also was drawn to this slide because it talks about the step and grade plan that I mentioned at the retreat, that we need to have an actual pay plan rather than just sort of Kentucky windage on how much people get paid. And so I thought, okay, well, at least we've been thinking about it, and just might not be at the exact point where we can pull it off yet. Talk about debt payments. This is the same slide as last year. Nothing changed, so I didn't feel a need to produce a new slide. So you see where your debt capacity starts to get pretty significant in fiscal year 32. I typically like to save money for things we buy, not borrow money for things we buy. So, all goes well, I'll still be here in fiscal year 32, but I will probably be recommending that you don't borrow for much, if anything. If we can figure out a way to save for it, that would be my preference. But what that really shows is, though, then you're going to see some huge increases to your general fund capacity because you don't have to pay all that debt obligation. Mm-hmm. And that just does keep going down over time. Flat for the next couple of years, but keeps going down after that. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're just still in the middle of it. So here's a summary. And like I said, it's not useful to compare previous years because of the ARPA and whatnot. I did include a 2.5% COLA. We added 2 FTEs in fiscal year 25. You added those at your A1 budget amendment in December, one of them being the person that's going to run down delinquent tickets and that sort of thing. And that person has also been training with Patty to be able to run down delinquent taxes and other things that were owed. The $1 million or so that the police department is owed is less than half of what the total city is owed in delinquent payments and different things. And so we're going to use this person to run all this stuff down. And I say that because that also helps us. You know, that if we can get more money coming in, then you have more options. And we'll say, just pointing out, you did lower your that should be 17 cents per hundred, not 1,000 assessed value, but 17 cents per hundred since 2021. That's gone down pretty significantly. Capital budget, a little bit less, but again, we had to kick some things down the road, and plus, you know, we spent ARPA money on a lot of things that were long overdue. Like I said, debt and reserve stays the same. Here's just a recap of the recommendations on the enterprise funds. So again, the outlook is, you know, we're going to have narrow margins for the next couple of years with the ARPA going away and the end of the SAFER grant, which paid for 15 firefighters. You know, we need to figure out how to pay for that without having this other grant money. We are asking our Merchant McIntyre folks to find other places where we might get money to be able to augment some of these things. I mean, no more ARPA, hopefully no more pandemic, but there's public safety money that still seems to be isn't being looked at very closely by the current administration, so there are probably some opportunities there. So, and that's 27 when that becomes a real big problem, so we'll get some time to look at it and plan for it. Again, we'll continue to pursue every opportunity we can. Residential commercial development is ongoing, and that should result in increases in all the funds. I mean, not just our property tax or real estate tax, but the more water users we have, the lower our water bills go. So that's why I'm not too concerned about looking out beyond this year, because we don't know what the impact's going to be once these things come online. But I do want to say it is crucial to maintain our focus on economic development. We don't have a huge industrial, you know, we don't have a Boeing or something here that generates revenue, you know, in its sleep, and so we have to do that on our own. And we can't let our foot up off the gas when it comes to economic development. I do want to thank Keith for his patience over the last 3 months and getting me to understand the plan. But I now think I do understand it, which is probably a bad place for me to be, but think I understand it. But it's a good plan, and it will sustain us, and it will help us grow, and it will help us be able to address some of these other issues like lowering the real estate tax and doing something with the enterprise fund rates. But we're not there yet. So like I said, we got to keep our foot on the gas, make sure these things get seen to the end. Next, well, I thought it was going to be the CIP. You did that first, so scratch that. May 6th is your rate setting meeting. We're not asking you to take any action tonight. This is just a presentation. Whatever questions you ask, we'll go away and try to answer them, or if there's different kind of modeling you'd like to see. And then you come together on May 6th to do your rate setting, which is all your enterprise funds and your taxes. So, and then any other edits that you might make to the budget or you might want us to make, that's what's next. We made it. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you jumping in head first and tackling this budget this year. I appreciate your recommendations. I think we all need to take another look at page 32. We're no longer, if we reduce 1 cent, we're no longer going to be the highest, which we've been for, I have no idea how long, but way too long. That being said, I hesitate to lower our rate more than 1 cent due to what you just told us. We have no more ARPA. We have 15 firefighters we have to fund. And unfortunately, we have no movie theater that we thought we would have by now. We are balancing this budget with our, what's the new term?
Unassigned fund balance.
Thank you. So reducing the real estate tax more than that rate, or yeah, right now might not be the best choice. We did project to do it 1 cent this year, so it's not breaking with our projection or our intent. Let's see, I have a couple questions. I do hesitate to increase some of the enterprise funds quite as much. We'll have to marinate on that and let him know, especially water sewer, before we do a fee study. And just wondering, are there any positions that maybe don't belong in some of these enterprise funds that maybe belong more appropriately in the general fund? I would kind of want to look at that.
We can, I don't think so, especially, water, sewer, and stormwater are pretty thin. I think there's only one person in stormwater, so,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, they pay for part of Calvin and whatnot too, but, yeah. But yes, definitely.
Okay. I was wondering if Mr. Lyons could come up here and explain it to me like I'm in kindergarten, the borrowing from the school, if you don't mind. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Good evening. A few years back, we worked with the board to set up that stabilization line, which, thank you, it's been a lifesaver. Right now, I anticipate at the end of FY '24, once the audit's finished, to return about 1.3 million back to that stabilization line.
Okay.
What we heard tonight is what we discussed earlier. There was, the city previous manager had did a 10-year allocation projection for the schools revenue from the city. And in that revenue projection for FY '26, it was set at 14.6 million. And that's the budget I presented a few weeks ago. But as you heard, Carl mentioned that part of that 14.6, which was unbeknownst to us, was on the second line somewhere. I assumed it was because we had borrowed from the stabilization, not borrowed, but withdrew from the stabilization line the previous year. So I thought maybe that, I assumed it was built in to cover that, as because those costs roll forward. So I thought that's what that was. So the difference of 533, 536 plus the 820 we presented is about 1.3, 1.4 million.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And I anticipate the fund balance of that stabilization line balance to be around 2 to 2.3 after all is said and done.
2 to 3.
2 million to 2.3 million after all is said and done.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And then just one question, and I'll kick it down. Just to clarify, there are no positions being added in our budget this year.
That is correct. I am not filling the chief public health officer position that's been cut, as well as the housing coordinator position has been cut.
Okay.
Because we don't need the work done anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, everything else, it's 2025 all over again.
Okay, so we're down 2 actually. Down 2 FTEs because those are cut.
Well, yeah, they're cut just because we don't have the work for them, but
Right.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Councilmember.
Well, I think it was 7 total cuts, right? That's what it is.
In 2025, you made 7 cuts, but then at your first amendment, you added 2 back. Well, you added 2. I don't know if they're 2 back, or if they're ones that were cut, but you added 2 in December. So a net of 5.
So 5 cuts, yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, so the 800,000 that we're taking from the
Stabilization fund.
stabilization line, right? And then that's gonna go to our general fund to balance the budget. That's what you're
Correct.
gonna use that for. So, I mean, with the unassigned fund balance that we have, what's the need for taking extra the stabilization line?
There might not be, and I'm optimistic that we're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million more than I used as my base when I made this budget. And if that's the case, then we're going to revisit this and figure out how to move forward. But I took a very conservative approach, just because I don't want to be surprised. And
Yeah.
so and we were able, and again, also, thanks to Tony, who's done 60-hour weeks on this for the last month and a half, to come to a balance, to come put together all these components and make it balance was a challenge. And so I think we're gonna have some options, but I don't want to plan for it until I know it, so.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I would prefer they don't touch that if we don't need to.
Me too, yeah.
Even
Absolutely.
after using the unassigned, I'm saying. Yeah, unassigned fund balance, if we allocate that instead of using the stabilization line. Because
Well,
we didn't anticipate the unassigned fund balance until right now, right?
Well, that money's included in that number.
Okay.
So that's part of that amount above your policy to the 13 is including that 1.3 from the schools.
So either way, we still have to take the
Mhm.
800,000 from the schools.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's another item that I would not probably support either. Second thing was on I think it was the solid sewer, you said 70, or the solid waste 75% to stabilize it?
To make it, to eliminate general fund subsidies
Subsidies, right.
going forward, yes.
So for the, I think the 3-year projection, you had 25, 30, 30.
Yes.
So that's a total of 85%, right? Am I looking at that wrong?
We compounds, but again, that's just to make the model work. I think with the 75%, there was still one small subsidy, but that eliminated it. But again, I'm not concerned about the next years because as we add users, as we add things, as we get, our water meters are more accurate. I mean, there's so many things variables that could affect this in a positive way that I just knew that 75% wouldn't be palatable, so.
That's it for me.
For our annual debt payments, what's the average interest rate that we're paying on the 66 million?
I do not know. Who's Josh?
And we, you know. Okay, just curious. All right, I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, and depending on when they were issued, you'd get different interest rates, and I think they refinanced as
did.
well, so you'll have different interest rates, but yeah, Josh will get that for you.
All right, thanks.
Carl, going to the assumptions again, another question or clarification. I think it's slide 8. The the second bullet point, general inflation rate of between 2.5 and 3% baked in. Just that baked in statement, I have a question about is what you mean. Are you saying that each department, every department, not including COLA, because the bullet point talks about the 2.5 COLA, but do we increase every department by 2.5 to 3%?
Not every department,
general
but
inflation?
for general inflation, for things that inflate, like the cost of fuel and these sorts of things, yes, but I said 2.5 to 3 because we use different rates depending on what it was. We try to be as close to reality or as realistic as we can. So when I say baked in, it's like if it costs $500,000 for fuel this year, it's going to cost $550,000 next year. Just bake in that percentage. So that's what I mean by baked in.
And I understand fuel, but what about things like travel, professional development, and things like that, which we may at a time of austerity have to reduce or cut back or look at freezing this fiscal year? That's a concern that I have.
Yeah, I don't think
if we're
we did
inflating
that.
the entire department by
Sure.
2.5 to 3%.
Yeah, I'm not sure we did that. I will say that training and travel is another area that I would like to change. Rather than just giving everybody a sum of money, I would like people to fill out a form that says, where do you think you need to go this year and how much does it cost? But I can't tell you for sure if we increase those by an inflator as well.
Yeah, an answer about that, 'cause I'm really curious.
Yeah, I can find
Whether we
out.
inflated supplies and things of that nature. Because I also agree with Councilmember Javed, I'm concerned about the enterprise funds. I think his argument about why we've done it over the years to subsidize, to keep our residents having to pay less for their water bill, even though they complain about it all the time. Given the fact that up until recently, we had the highest property tax. And so therefore, we subsidize other things to make it affordable for our residents. What I would really like to have, there's a couple things I'd like to have going forward in the meetings, is just a total impact. And I think Councilmember Seiberling was kind of getting to that point of everything. So when I look at on page 30, it talks about the tax implications. That a single-family home, because of assessments, I realize because of assessed value, we're reducing it by 1 cent. It's still going up by 483 cents, or $483, excuse me.
Yep.
So when you put on top of that the increases to the water and sewer and storm, or whatever.
Additional 136.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'd like to see that in the chart for all these, the total impact to our residents. Because I think that would be important to see. The other thing I'd like to see is FTEs. How many FTEs do we have in the city?
Okay.
How many are filled? How many are vacant?
Okay.
And then how many are funded? Because based on the definition, I know we use that words a little differently than most cities. So whether or not the position is funded is important going forward as well. And then May 6th, we, on this dais, will be voting on the rates. Is that the day that we'll be voting on the 1 cent property tax and all the enterprise funds that you're recommending tonight?
That's
on May
when it's
6th?
on the calendar, yes.
That's
'Cause
the
I'm
not
sorry.
to exceed rate.
not to exceed rate, so it's not the actual increase?
Right, we just can't go above
You
that.
can lower it, but you can't.
Okay, you're
go
right, oh
above.
yeah, that's a good point, good point. So also, I mean, I think this is gonna be shocking to our citizens, so I hope we have a plan to, or at least do some kind of marketing to try to get people to come to this meeting and voice their concerns. I'm not sure what we can do, Facebook or that flashing sign that we have out on the roads or something to let them know that that meeting will be voting on, it may be some significant increases to their yearly expenditures going forward. The other question I had is really somewhat, it's quasi-related to tonight's discussion, the bond rating. I think we recently had our bond rating redone for the bonds that we're about to float.
It's in
What-
progress.
I'm sorry?
It's in progress, it's not.
Oh, it
done.
hasn't been done
No.
yet, so we don't know. That was my question.
Well, we still have a AA bond rating. Our bond rating hasn't changed. We're hoping that it improves.
Then I was hoping to,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was my question. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are we going to be discussing ways that we can, based on his recommendations, ways that we can either reduce the amount of funds that we're going to be putting, in other words, move numbers around so that we can do what Hasib is suggesting of not increasing the enterprise funds? Are we as a council going to get together and actually discuss each CIP situation or whatever?
Yeah, I think.
Like Hasib was saying, maybe sit down with each director and maybe we don't all have to do it at the same time, but it's just something that we're gonna be thinking of so that we can figure out where we can maybe,
I would argue that that's out of our pay grade and that we hired that man to do that.
okay,
And so we just give him the direction and say, we're not happy with.
okay.
And that would be my preference as well. If you say, hey, we're okay with 5% here, then I'll figure out what that number is, and I'll
Okay.
figure out what that means, you know,
Okay.
so. We can do different models, but yeah, you don't need to, I mean, there's thousands of lines, and that's, you don't want to do that, promise.
So would you prefer that we kind of marinate on that and then email you our suggestion?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's no action required tonight. This is the first time you've seen this,
Right.
so, you know, it's a lot to take in, and, you know, hey, we've lived as a very parsimonious city for our entire existence, and this is a result of that. And so my recommendation is that we stop doing that, but it's not my decision, it's yours, so.
But that gives directions as to what you're looking for us to do for you.
Yeah, so if you decide that you want to subsidize water and sewer by some amount or something, then just, that's what I need to know. Be careful, though, I will say, please just reply to me, don't reply to all of you, because you can't have a serial meeting on email on these topics. You know, so just reply to me and I'll assemble the information.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I'm not okay with just a 1% decrease. I think we can do better. We've got money coming from the unassigned fund balance, the stabilization money. We're adding money back to the general fund by having the citizens pay the difference for the water, the sewage, the solid waste. We have increased to 68% in the assessed value, so we're getting money there as well. So I think we can do better with the real estate tax rate for sure, because that impacts our homeowners. The sewage, water, and solid waste, that increase is impacting our homeowners and our renters. So I think that's one of the things I want to think about, is who we're impacting with the real estate tax decrease. The property tax, the personal property is staying the same, so we're doing a solid to our renters and to our homeowners with that staying the same. So that's just something to think about. I do think we should do better, much better than 1%, or 1 cent.
And I just want to say, all of those things you mentioned are already in this budget. That there's not extra money coming because we're not the general fund reflects not subsidizing the enterprise funds already, so.
And I think we can do better. We need to find other ways to cut. And you talked about different areas, different things that we've padded or increased. We need to either cut back, that includes an increase, but 1 cent is not enough for our citizens.
Okay, and again, that was what I took from the retreat,
Yep.
so that's what we
Yep.
built in.
So, and again, our real estate assessments have gone up 6 to 8%. Mine went up 9.5% last year. So we've been taking a hit for quite some time.
And just quick math, if we were to flatline for your single-family house, It looks like 1 cent is about $50, so we need to lower it another 9 cents to have no impact on the real estate tax. So, I'm just, to put it in perspective, so.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
to follow up about the assessments. Either our assessor or dean or yourself, is it possible for us to freeze assessments as a city? If we say we're gonna go and use 2025's assessments going forward for this year? Can we do that as a council?
I have never had that question posed before, so I don't know.
Yeah, if you could look up an answer for that. Maybe Keith knows or Tony.
Assessment every year by state code, I think.
Yeah, I think the state regulates.
But so we can't freeze it, we can't say we're not gonna assess at a higher
No,
rate?
if you do one every year.
I mean, the thing you gotta understand, I think the assessment is gonna keep going with pursuing economic development, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it needs to higher.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the more economic development we do, the higher the assessment is gonna go up. Supply and demand, the housing. But, I mean, that's why I think I brought a couple of years ago is that, focusing on attractability to the city, like parks and schools, instead of economic development, can kind of increase property value that way, instead of adding more infrastructure and housing, which will increase the assessments even more faster than that. But that's a whole different economics class there. But either way, I mean, the assessments, if the homeowners sell it, they get more for their buck. When they sell, the property value goes up. So I don't see the assessments going down anytime soon. It's just, we just need to gradually keep reducing our real estate tax.
Or find another source of revenue.
Or find another source of revenue, right, increase our revenue stream. But, I mean, back to the comment I had again with the unassigned fund balance, is that on the slide, it just mentions that we're not using it. Right?
No, we are using it.
Because on 8, it just said it was just gonna go to a slide.
We're using about 1 point, I can't
It says
remember.
leaving 2.263 in UFB.
Right, but then
Allocated?
that's what we're using to balance the budget.
Okay.
That's my point. is-
I see,
yeah.
so it's not just gonna sit there.
Yeah, that's in the budget. So,
Okay.
I'm not down to the penny, but for the most part,
Right.
so. But again, I fully expect that we're gonna end up with somewhere in the neighborhood of $17 million in our, once the audit comes in. And so, then we have options. We can talk about different things at that point. But I built this in the most austere manner possible, just so that we could get by and not get jammed up at some point, so.
If we reduce the CIP budget overall to under 23 million, say we have cost savings of extra 3 million, can we do another cent reduction on real estate tax, you think?
So what I would ask is that if you, as a policy, want to reduce the real estate tax by another penny, let me figure out how to do that.
Right.
Whether that's CIP or other things, I mean,
So let's look at that model too. Let's see if we do a 2 cents or 2.50 cents reduction,
253.
just so we could compare. I mean,
yeah, I'm happy to model whatever you want.
yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, so email your suggestions. We have a budget work session next Tuesday along with our law firm interviews. And basically a budget work session every Tuesday, forever, so.
Until you don't need them anymore.
Right.
If I get all the information, and I'm gonna have to rewatch the meeting to make sure I capture everything, but we can probably get that turned around pretty quick now that the models are established, as I'm committing Tony to more 60-hour weeks. But I'm not looking at her. But then, because I think if we can get this resolved rather quickly, that would be the
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
Before we, one more question. Can you state how much our debt is, so now?
Was that total on there?
Yes, our city debt?
That's what I took away from slide 39, debt down to 66.5 million in fiscal year 25.
Yeah, so our debt payments are just over $8 million a year until 27. In 27, it'll go just under $8 million a year. The total debt is down to 66.5, and that was last year, so minus roughly 8 million. So you're looking at 58 million.
Thank you.
The last point I want to make about the enterprise fund is that I think, Cyberlink was saying, or maybe I misheard, but yeah, the water, sewer, salt, that affects everybody, renters too, like not just homeowners. So, I mean, that's the thing, it's gonna hit them hard
Yeah.
with these increases. But, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick, because you mentioned it, I did want to give a shout out to Tony. Thank you for your work on the budget. This year I've heard a lot about you from other people, and what great work you do on the budget, so thank you.
And I'm remiss in not thanking everyone, all the departments. This was a lot of work, especially trying to bring someone in who's starting from zero. And they all, like I said, exhibited great patience and understanding, as I had to ask the same question 15 times before I understood it, so.
Okay, thank you.
Carl.
Yep.
Our next public comment time. Does anyone want to make public comment?
Madam Mayor,
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm like, who said that?
sorry, I just want to remind you all that if you do decide to use reserves as a means to lowering, you need to make that decision before the 6th, because that will raise your budgeted amount. And we need to not raise that after we set that and send the advertising in.
Okay, thank you. So that decision needs to be made before the 6th. Along that note, it would be good to talk about our cash flow issues and how we are sometimes cutting it pretty close. So I think maybe some of our newer members are not aware of that. So if we could maybe talk about that next meeting? The
Sure, I'm
impact of
not
lowering
100%
our-
aware of that myself, so.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
perhaps Keith could
Enlighten us.
enlighten us next meeting about our cash flow and the impact of lowering much more than a cent would be, we wouldn't have the cash flow capacity, if that's okay with you. and
Yeah,
Keith.
great,
Okay.
yeah, whatever you want to know, yeah.
Okay. All right, no public comments. City manager report.
I think you've heard enough from me tonight.
Okay. All right.
Good answer.
Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
First question.